The water was already up to my chest when I screamed. Not because I thought someone would hear me. I knew they wouldn't. The doors were jammed. The power had died. And my phone, it slipped from my lap and vanished beneath the rising water, glowing faint blue for a second before dying. I remember the sound of the rain pounding the roof, the clicking of the hazard lights, and then silence, then glass. A fist punched through the passenger window, shards everywhere. I gasped, water surged in, and he grabbed my jacket. A man, soaked, strong, silent. He pulled me out with everything he had, dragged me through the current, and then let go. I turned around, coughing, choking on fear, but he was gone. No name, no thank you, no goodbye. And for 10 years, I thought that was the end of it, until the day I became a paramedic. Most people think rock bottom comes after a tragedy. Mine came before. I used to manage logistics at a regional distribution warehouse in the outskirts of Ashford. Spreadsheets, overtime, impossible deadlines. I was decent at it. Not great, just reliable, invisible. My desk was in the back, under a flickering light no one ever replaced. On the wall, a curling photo of the Grand Canyon, taken during a road trip I promised I'd one day finish. I never did. Most days, I ate lunch at my desk, a tuna sandwich, lukewarm coffee. No one sat with me, and I didn't mind. I told myself I was busy, but the truth? I was tired of everyone, especially myself. I lived alone in a modest apartment 2 blocks from the freeway, the kind of place where the walls are thin and the neighbors don't make eye contact. My cat, Darwin, greeted me at the door. He was 13, with a permanent limp from a fall when he was a kitten. I always told people he walked like me, stubborn and slightly broken. The last real relationship I had was with someone named Jonah. He used to write me little notes on sticky pads and leave them on my mirror. Drink water today. You're not your job. Come home earlier. I miss you. I never responded. Not really. On the night he left for good, he didn't slam the door. He just placed one last note on the fridge. I hope one day you choose to stay present, even for yourself. That was 2 years before the flood. My mother called once a week. I let it go to voicemail more times than I answered. She had cancer once, beat it, and somehow still had more energy than I did. I think it made her anxious to talk to someone who sounded half alive. The last time we spoke, she said, "You know what I miss? You laughing. That used to light up a room." I didn't remember the last time I laughed, not genuinely. I didn't even remember the last time I cried. I was 35, and I had no real dreams left. Just the same morning drive to a job I didn't love. Just the same face in the elevator mirror, looking back with dull eyes. And then came the rain. That week, it didn't stop. The sky was a gray bruise, and the roads filled like someone had pulled the plug from under the city. On Thursday night, I stayed late, fixing a freight report that would be forgotten in a week. I could have left earlier. I should have, but I didn't. And it's strange how one ordinary decision, staying at work an extra hour, becomes the thread that pulls your entire life loose. That night, I drove straight into a submerged section of North Line Road. The signs hadn't gone up yet. The dip in the road was hidden under what looked like a shallow puddle, until I was halfway in and the car started to float. I remember my fingers trembling over the lock button. I remember my breath fogging the windshield. I remember thinking, so this is it? This is how it ends? In silence? In water? But I wasn't meant to die that night. Someone else made sure of that. Someone who didn't wait to be asked, who didn't need recognition, who vanished as quietly as they came. And while I walked away that night with soaked clothes and shattered nerves, I also walked away with something else, a question that would haunt me for years. Why did he save me? And what was I supposed to do with the life he gave back? The emergency room was loud that night. Too many calls, not enough staff. But inside me, everything was quiet. After the rescue, I was treated for mild hypothermia and a fractured wrist from when he pulled me through the broken window. I kept repeating the same thing to the nurses. There was someone. He pulled me out. Did anyone see him? Did he come in with me? Was he hurt? But they just exchanged glances and wrote notes on their clipboards. One of them smiled. In that way people do when they think trauma has made you invent things. They assumed I was confused. I wasn't. I spent 2 nights in a hospital room with a window that looked out onto the parking lot. I watched people leave. No one came for me. No family. No friends. Just Darwin at home. and an inbox full of unread reports from work. My supervisor sent a single text. "Take what you need. We'll see you Monday." That was it. No call. No, "Are you okay?" When I returned, no one mentioned it. Not a single person. I walked back into that warehouse like nothing had happened, and everyone let me. That was the first betrayal. Not from a person, but from a system that files trauma under miscellaneous and keeps the machine running. I tried to go back to normal. I really did. But normal didn't fit anymore. I couldn't focus on spreadsheets. I couldn't laugh at small talk. I couldn't even sit in my car without gripping the wheel like it might disappear from under me. I started waking up at 3:17 a.m. every night, the same time I looked at the dashboard clock while water filled the cabin. My dreams always ended the same. I'd reach for the door handle and see his face through the glass, and then I'd wake up, gasping. I started researching rescues, floods, civilian heroes, emergency responder protocols. I found no reports, no leads, nothing. Whoever he was, he never filed anything, never came forward. I called the fire department. I called the hospital. All they had was my name on a clipboard and a broken car pulled from a ditch. A week later, I went to a trauma support group. They asked us to introduce ourselves by what we survived. I couldn't, because the truth was, I didn't feel like I had survived. I felt like I'd been passed on, like a baton, given a second chance that I hadn't earned. And now I owed a life I didn't know how to live. The second betrayal came one afternoon in the break room. A younger analyst, 25, confident, bright, turned to me and said, "You always seem kind of distracted lately. You good?" I forced a smile. "Just tired." She nodded and walked off, and I realized I had become invisible. Again, just like before, only now I was haunted too. One night, I opened a drawer and found one of Jonah's old sticky notes. "You're not your job." I held it in my hand for a long time, and for the first time since the flood, I let myself cry. Not from fear, but from the weight of being forgotten. Twice, the system had moved on. The city had moved on. Even I was expected to move on. But how do you walk forward when the only thing pulling you is a ghost with no name? It didn't happen all at once. There was no epiphany. No dramatic decision. Just a moment, one Tuesday morning, when I realized I couldn't keep pretending. I was sitting in my parked car outside the warehouse, engine off, staring at the front door like it was the mouth of something that ate people whole. And I thought, if I died in there, no one would know until payroll flagged it. That thought didn't scare me. It made me feel calm. That was the real danger. The numbness. The way grief, when ignored long enough, stops screaming and just holds your hand until you disappear. So I walked away. I didn't give 2 weeks' notice. I didn't clear my desk. I just left. That afternoon, I stood outside a community college building, unsure why I'd driven there, watching paramedic trainees file out of a CPR class. They looked exhausted, determined, like people who'd been face to face with death and came back speaking its language. A flyer on the corkboard caught my eye. EMT certification, late enrollment still open. Something in me moved. Not inspiration, not hope, just movement, like a broken compass twitching north. I signed up. The program wasn't glamorous. Long nights, bad coffee, bones and blood on training dummies, stories from instructors that made the room go quiet. But for the first time, I was learning something that felt real, something that mattered. I kept thinking, if he hadn't pulled me out, would anyone have come in time? And then another thought, could I be that person for someone else? Not to repay him, I couldn't, but to prove that the moment he chose to risk his life for mine wasn't wasted. One of my instructors, Lyle, was an old medic who spoke in half sentences and carried grief like a second uniform. He told us, the job isn't about saving people, it's about showing up when no one else can. That stuck with me. During the ride-alongs, I saw everything. Overdoses, collapsed lungs, mothers screaming in Spanish, a man who asked if we'd feed his dog before he let go. But the worst, the hardest, were the silences, the calls where we got there too late, the way a siren, no matter how loud, can't turn back time. Still, I showed up, even when I was scared, even when I felt like a fraud. My first year on the job, I barely slept. I kept Darwin's collar in my front pocket. He had passed quietly one night during training, and it grounded me. A reminder of how quiet goodbyes can be. By year 2, I started to feel something I hadn't in years. Presence. Not happiness, not peace, just presence. A sense that I was in the world again, that I had earned my place in it. Not because I was a hero, but because I was willing to carry someone else's pain without looking away. Still, the question remained. Who was he? I kept an eye out, even years later. Every flood, every community rescue. I'd read the reports. But there was never a name that matched, never a citation, never a photograph. He had disappeared like a ghost, and part of me had accepted that maybe that's all he'd ever be. But then came the storm, the one that changed everything, again. The call came in at 4:42 p.m. Multiple injuries, vehicle rollover, rural Route 17, mile marker 43, downed power lines, possible cardiac trauma. Storm season had arrived early. We drove into the black, wind howling, trees bending like they were praying, rain hitting the windshield like it was angry. I was on shift with Kyle, 24, fresh, still thought energy drinks counted as hydration. He didn't talk much on storm calls. None of us did. When we got to the scene, it was chaos. A pickup had flipped into a culvert, tires spinning, horns screaming. The driver had been pulled out by bystanders, unconscious, bleeding from the head. I dropped to my knees beside him, fingers to the pulse, weak but there. "Sir?" I called, tapping his chest. "Can you hear me?" Nothing. Kyle started prepping the AED. I leaned closer. "We're paramedics. You're okay. We're here now. Stay with me." That's when I saw it. A deep scar running along the man's forearm. Old, jagged. A patch of skin where glass had once torn through muscle. My breath caught. That scar. It looked exactly like the pattern on my passenger side window. The night he broke it. My hands hesitated. No, it couldn't be. But the weight in my chest said otherwise. We loaded him fast. Monitored vitals. En route, he stirred. Just barely. A groan. A hand twitch. Then a whisper. Hoarse. Broken. "You made it out." I froze. Kyle didn't catch it. He was focused on the vitals. "What did you say?" I whispered, leaning closer. The man's eyes blinked open. Pale blue. Distant. He looked at me like he was staring through time. Then he closed his eyes again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled the old ER report from my flood, the one I had saved in the back of a file drawer. I checked the timestamp. 3:17 a.m. I checked this man's intake. He had been registered at 3:41 a.m. that same night, treated for deep lacerations, exposure, and a dislocated shoulder. No name listed. Unidentified male, left without formal discharge. He had been there. He was the one. He never left a name, never stayed to be thanked, just like I remembered. I wanted to go see him, to walk into that hospital room and ask 1,000 questions, to give him everything I'd carried all these years. But when I got there the next morning, the bed was empty. Discharged at 6:12 a.m., the nurse told me. Walked out, no contacts, refused transport, gone again. But this time, he had looked at me. He had spoken. "You made it out," like he had been watching from somewhere all along. And I realized maybe this wasn't about being found. Maybe it was about understanding why people choose to disappear. He came back 3 days later, not at the hospital, not in some dramatic reveal. He came to the station. It was just past 6 p.m. I was cleaning the stretcher after a late afternoon call, alone in the bay. The sun was bleeding through the tall windows, throwing long amber shadows across the floor. That's when I heard the soft knock on the glass door. He was standing there, clean face, simple clothes, the scar unmistakable on his forearm, a jagged reminder of a night neither of us could forget. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he gave a slight nod, almost like asking permission to come in. I nodded back. He walked toward me slowly, like someone stepping into a place they'd only seen in a dream. We stood there, face to face, without a word. Finally, he spoke. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used much lately. "Didn't think you'd remember my face." I didn't even hesitate. I never forgot it. He looked around the room, at the uniforms, the stretcher, the oxygen tanks. "So, you really did it." "I had to," I said quietly. "You gave me a life I didn't know what to do with. This was the only thing that ever made sense." He nodded but didn't smile, just rested a hand on the scar, almost absent-mindedly, like tracing a path back through time. "I wasn't supposed to be there that night," he said. "I was heading home, saw your car, knew the dip in the road. The water wasn't right." I stopped. Why didn't you stay? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He paused. Because that moment wasn't about me. It was about you. I swallowed hard. I've been trying to thank you for 10 years. He shook his head. Not harshly, but like it mattered. Don't. If you thank me, it becomes mine. I want it to stay yours. We were silent again. Then he said softly, I'm leaving town. I never stay long. I've done this in a few places. Storms, rescues. Then I go. Why? His eyes finally met mine. Deeply, fully. Because every time you save someone, a piece of you stays behind. I've left too many pieces already. There was no pride in his voice, no regret either. Just truth, heavy and plain. Then why come back? I asked. He reached into his jacket and laid something on the counter. A small, brown envelope. Because I need to ask you for something. Inside was a name, an address, a boy. He's 12, lives with his grandmother. His dad was me. Before I disappeared, my heart stopped. Why me? Because you know what it means to be pulled out of something and not know how to stand afterward. I didn't know what to say. He looked at the gear around us, the quiet, the echoes. He'll need someone who understands presence, he said. What about you? He exhaled slowly. I'm not someone he needs to know, but maybe you are. He turned to go. Wait, I called out. You never told me your name. He paused and smiled, just a little, just enough. It doesn't matter. And then he walked out the same way he had 10 years ago, quietly, leaving everything behind. Except this time, he left something with me, a choice, to chase him or to carry him forward, not in name, but in purpose. The envelope sat on my nightstand for 2 weeks, unopened. Every morning I'd glance at it, not like a task, more like a question I wasn't ready to answer. The name inside wasn't just a boy, it was a weight, a responsibility, a mirror. Accepting it would mean turning towards something permanent, and I wasn't there yet, so I did the only thing I knew how to do. I went back on shift, back to sirens, to oxygen masks, to the sound of life trying to hold on. A few nights later, we got a call from a middle school boy, asthma attack, during football practice. We pulled up just as the sun was starting to fall. The field cast long gold shadows. Coaches were shouting. A teacher waved us over. The boy was on the sideline, pale, gasping, hands clawing at the air. Maybe 10, eyes wild. I dropped to my knees and leaned in close. You're okay. I've got you. In through the nose, out through the mouth. He tried, failed, tried again. I held his hand. Just breathe with me. Slowly, it worked. The wheezing softened. His grip on my hand relaxed. He looked up at me, barely able to speak, and whispered, You came fast. I smiled. Someone once did that for me. I figured it was my turn, and I meant it. In that moment, I didn't need the envelope. I didn't need closure, or answers, or names, because that boy, shaking, scared, holding onto my wrist like it was the only solid thing in the world, reminded me of myself. Not just the night of the flood, but the morning after, when everything still hurt, but I wasn't alone anymore. A few days later, we got a new recruit at the station. Rookie, nervous eyes, name tag said Ray. First call, she rode with me, quiet on the drive, watching everything, asking nothing, but absorbing everything. After the call, she turned to me and asked, How do you stay calm when it gets really bad? I didn't think, I just answered. You don't always, but you stay present. She tilted her head, confused. I just smiled. One day, it'll make sense to her. That night, I stopped at a gas station for coffee. Ray went inside. I stood outside by the ambulance, sipping quietly. The sky was bruised purple. The kind of sky that feels like a closing sentence. For the first time in years, I closed my eyes, and I didn't see water, didn't feel panic, didn't hear glass breaking. Instead, I saw a hand reaching through the darkness, not pulling this time, passing something forward, not a duty, not a legacy, just presence. And I understood something I hadn't before. Some people save your life once, others teach you how to live it, and sometimes, if you're lucky, you become both.
Love this story? Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. Don't forget to check out the video currently on your screen. You won't want to miss it. See you in the next one.